To our webinar. We're really delighted to have you with us. We have Marconi Campos with us today. He's going to be speaking about eavesdropping on nature, how acoustic monitoring can help us conserve species and habitats in the Caribbean and the tropics. So we will hold questions and answers until the end of the webinar. So please go ahead and write them in the Q&A panel, which you can find in your toolbar at the bottom of the screen. Or you can write them in the chat window. We'll be monitoring that, and we'll be sure to have plenty of time at the end for discussion and for Marconi to answer your questions. So just a little bit of background before we get started, a couple announcements. I think most of you that are signed in know us, but just in case you're new, we are BirdsCaribbean. We're a nonprofit regional bird conservation organization. We're dedicated to the conservation of birds and nature in all the islands of the Caribbean, and we work really hard at raising awareness, promoting sound science, and empowering all of our wonderful local partners to help us build a region where people appreciate and conserve and benefit from thriving bird populations and ecosystems. Right now, we have ongoing our annual Caribbean Endemic Bird Festival. This happens every spring for a few weeks during April and May. And our theme this year is Sing, Fly, Soar Like a Bird, which is a really wonderful theme. And throughout this month and next month, we've been doing Endemic Bird of the Day. So we have 30 new species with coloring pages and online puzzles, activity sheets for kids, sharing bird calls and videos of these different birds. We're having weekly webinars just like this one that you're joining with us today. And just a heads up that we'll have David Sibley next Thursday at 4 p.m. So be sure to register for that webinar. We also have ongoing for the first time this year, a bird zine contest. And this is where you have the chance to get creative and make your own little self-published booklet about birds. So we have awesome prizes for that. We have 2 pairs of binoculars and some other prizes for different age categories. So I hope you'll check that out on our website. The deadline for submission has been extended to May 30th. So you have plenty of time to make your zine, and we have examples on our website. So we invite you to join us and follow along. The other thing that is happening very soon, on Saturday in fact, is Global Big Day. And this is a day where people all over the world are going birding. And it's a great opportunity to just go out and celebrate birds, enjoy being in nature. You can participate by just going out and watching birds in your backyard for a few minutes, or you can spend half a day or the whole day going out and looking for birds. But anyway, we at BirdsCaribbean, we have set up a GoFundMe page. You can see the bit.ly link there. And we've set up a number of teams. And we're inviting people from all over in the Caribbean and beyond to join us and join one of the teams and help us see as many species as we can and fundraise for a really good cause, science and conservation in the Caribbean. So we're really excited because now we have 13 teams signed up, including 9 national teams. We've got teams from Cuba, the Cayman Islands, the Bahamas, Barbuda, Jamaica, St. Eustatius, Venezuela, Puerto Rico, and Turks and Caicos Islands. So I really encourage you guys, if you haven't already joined a team, to join one of these teams and or support them with a donation. No amount is too small. Help us raise funds for science and conservation in the Caribbean. And most of all, go birding on Saturday, May 8th and enjoy birds. All right, so that's it for my little introduction. Thank you for joining us today, and happy birding, and stay in touch with us. I've got a few links there if you are not already connected with us, and I invite you to follow us on social media. And I will stop sharing so that I can turn it over to Marconi. He will be getting set up, and I'll just give him a brief introduction. He'll be sharing his screen. And welcome, Marconi. We're so happy to have you with us today. We're really excited about your talk. A lot of people are interested in passive acoustic monitoring and the really incredible work that your organization is doing. And I'm sure we're going to learn a lot. So Marconi is a biologist. He graduated with a master's degree in ecology at the National Institute of Research in Amazon. And he has a PhD in biology at the University of Puerto Rico. He's actually from Brazil originally, but he's lived in Puerto Rico for like what, the last 8 or 9 years. And his major interests are in avian ecology and conservation, bioacoustics, animal occupancy, endangered species, and soundscape ecology. And Marconi's current project focuses on monitoring biological populations through autonomous recording and automated identification of animal sounds. So welcome, Marconi, and I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you for the introduction, Lisa. And first of all, thank you very much for the invitation. It's a real pleasure to be talking with you today. I know that we are facing a very challenged time right now with the COVID and all the stuff. So I really cherish this moment where we can really have a place to talk a little bit about what we like, you know, like science, conservation, and birds. So thank you again for that opportunity. Let me share my screen. Okay, so can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay,
great.
Cool. Yeah, so yeah, my name is Marconi Campos. I'm the director of the science department in Rainforest Connection. And today I'm going to be talking about how can we use acoustic monitoring to help us to conserve species and habitats in the Caribbean and the tropics. As I have said, I'm part of the Rainforest Connection team. We are a nonprofit tech organization, mainly dedicated to improve how we are monitoring biodiversity and trying to stop illegal activities in threatened ecosystems around the world. And the main reason that we are focusing on really trying to provide solutions to improve the way that we monitor biodiversity around the world is that, as you may know, we are currently facing a global fauna decline crisis. We have lost more than 2.9 billion birds since 1970 in the United States. And the same pattern of species decline can be observed in different parts of the world and for different taxonomic groups, right? So we are seeing declines on insect species, on frog species, and mammal species. So that's why we are mainly dedicated to improve the way that we monitor fauna, to try to provide tools and solutions to really make a difference in the conservation of those species. And what is more worrisome, those species declines are being observed even in protected and pristine areas. So for example, here we have an excellent study conducted by Beth Lossell and John Blake in Eastern Ecuador, where they have a long-term bird monitoring project in 2 different locations in the lowland forest of Eastern Ecuador. So what we are seeing here in this graph is our 2 different locations, Arpia and Puma, and we are seeing a decline of bird numbers through all the years. So this is a long-term project, and that's really sad, right? Because again, that is happening in protected and pristine forests. And that's the kind of information that this long-term study that we really need to understand what is going on with fauna. But unfortunately, these kind of studies are particularly rare at the global scale, right? If we plot that study in the map, we will just have like a single little dot in the map. So what we can do to really improve the way that we monitor fauna and expand that monitoring in large, spatial, and temporal scales. Because we are doing a very good job at monitoring vegetation, right? Right now, we have a global time series with 30-meter resolution, so we can see where the forests are. We can monitor deforestation almost in real time, and we can even identify tree species using satellite images. But we know much less about the fauna within those forests. You know, like we really do not know what is happening with birds and other animals inside those forests. So we can monitor vegetation, we can monitor deforestation, but we do not have a clear picture of what is going on with the fauna inside those forests. And mainly, the main reason for that is that it is still very difficult and expensive to monitor animals. So again, what we can do to really improve the way that we monitor fauna, what we can do to have that same kind of study all around the world, right? Long-term monitoring to really understand trends and patterns of species population. So maybe one of the solutions is, so let's clone Beth Losell and John Blake. You know, like maybe that's a solution. I'm not sure that they will be happy with that. And I'm not sure that we are still there in terms of science. But actually we can do some clones. You know, like we can deploy several thousands of acoustic devices all around the world, and we can have those devices collecting information for us. And that's why I really think that acoustic monitoring can provide a powerful tool for us to improve the way that we monitor fauna and improve our efforts to conserve biodiversity. So why using acoustic monitoring? First of all, because there is a lot of information in an audio file, in an audio recording. So here, I'm showing you an spectrogram. An spectrogram is a visual representation of the audio file. So here in the x-axis, you have time in seconds, and here we have frequency. And what I'm showing here is just a 20-second audio file, a 20-second spectrogram. And you can see that in that only 20 seconds, we have identified more than 6 species of animals. And not only that, we are identifying different taxonomic groups. We are identifying birds, frogs, insects. We can certainly identify mammals. So there is a lot of information there. Like presence and absence of species is actually the most obvious data and that we can acquire from those recordings. We can extract much more. For example, for some species, we can have information about males and females, about adults and juveniles. We can have some information about relative abundance, for example. So we can extract biological, ecological, and behavioral information from the audio files. And not only that, you know, like I always focusing on birds. I love birds, and they usually are my focus species. But when I deploy a device in the field, the device really do not know what I'm interested in, and the device is recording pretty much the entire soundscape. So we have a lot of other information from the landscape that can help us to understand what is going on in that specific site. So for example, we can have sounds, we can detect sounds from chainsaw, from shotguns, from vehicles, from dogs. Those sounds can provide us information about, for example, some illegal activities, such as deforestation, illegal logging, illegal hunting. So we can not only monitor biodiversity, but also we can do monitoring of illegal activity at the same time, at the same site. And there's many other benefits of using acoustic monitoring. We can monitor many sites simultaneously, 24 hours per day, no observer bias. That's a no invasive technique, and that's why we called it passive acoustic monitoring, because there's no observed bias. It's not an invasive technique. And probably the most important from those benefits is the ability to have this permanent and verifiable record. So I usually compare the audio files as a museum specimen, right? Because there is like a permanent record that we can go back and another time, or other people can go back there and retrieve the information and use that to improve our knowledge on biodiversity. Unfortunately, acoustic monitoring is getting cheaper and cheaper. You know, the acoustic devices are getting cheaper. Not only cheaper, they are getting smaller, lightweighted. So right now, you can acquire an acoustic device for $200 or $50. They can fit in your hand. The audio quality is more than enough to conduct some ecological analysis. And as you can see in this graph, as soon as the acoustic device have becoming cheap, the number of studies and publications are increasing. So that's a very promising sign for us. And another good news is there are currently many different ways to extract information from the audio files. Right now, in this talk, I will be focusing more on the Rbmo platform. The Rbmo platform is a web-based platform that I helped to develop, and I have been using for more than 10 years now. And it can really help us to extract biological information from thousands of recordings. So for example, here I'm showing one of the tools that we have in Rbmo is the pattern matching. And for using the pattern matching, what you need is just one example of the call of your species. So here, for example, we have the Puerto Rico tanager. We have an example of the call. And what the pattern matching model is going to do is going to search for similar examples in your field recordings. And then we, the experts, the biologists, the ornithologists, are going to make sure that the program, that the computer is doing a good job. So we will make like a posterior validation and say, oh, that's okay, that's not so good. And then we can use that information, the presence and absence information from different sites, from different days, to plot the presence and absence of the species in a location. We can then combine the presence and absence information with environmental variables, such as humidity, precipitation, forest type, to create these species distribution models. As I have said, the Rbmo platform is the one that I'm currently using. There is different options out there. There are also options in R, in Python, in MATLAB. But what I really love in Rbmo is that we are trying to create this user-friendly platform. that so that the user do not really need to do any coding. It's just more click and click. It's a web platform. It's free, so everyone can go there, can create a project, upload your own recordings, and create your analysis. We have been working hard to create a very good documentation for all the steps in the platform. We have tutorials, we have YouTube videos. So check this out and let us know what you think about the platform. In Rbmo, you will see like we have two main approaches to extract information from the audio files. One of those is using the species identification models. Like I said, the pattern matching is one of the techniques that we have implemented in Rbmo right now. We also have random forest models and convolutional neural networks. I'm going to briefly say a little bit more about these convolutional neural networks at the end of my presentation. And also we have another more holistic approach, that is the soundscape approach, where we are not really interested in identifying species. We are more interested in see the patterns of vocal activity in a site and try to compare those patterns of vocal activity across sites and throughout the time. So I have been using Rbmo and Acoustic Monitoring for more than 10 years now in different projects to detect rare species, to evaluate the impact of mining and gas exploration in Amazonian birds, to study the impact of forest certification on Peruvian birds, to understand the effects of climate change on species distribution, and to study and to verify the overlap between protected areas and suitable habitats for birds and frogs here in Puerto Rico. So what I want to do right now is actually go a little bit deeper in some real life examples, examples of projects that we have been conducting here in Puerto Rico, and show you how can we really extract information from the audio files and make that useful from a conservation perspective. So we have been collaborating with Recursos Naturales, Fish and Wildlife, and Para la Naturaleza, with the University of Puerto Rico as well, with different researchers. We have been monitoring the elfinwood warbler in El Yunque and in Maricao, monitoring the Puerto Rican parrot in Rio Bajo, searching for the golden coqui, and evaluating the impact of hurricane and climate change on birds and frogs in Puerto Rico. So let's start exploring one of my first projects here in the island. It was the first chapter of my PhD, because it was like my first chapter, the first chapter of my PhD. I was a little bit more interested to understand if I could combine acoustic monitoring and occupants modeling. So what I did for my PhD was to establish 3 elevational gradients in El Yunque National Forest. I don't know if you guys know, but in El Yunque National Forest in Puerto Rico, El Yunque is this area over here, we have different forest types along the elevational gradient. So we have the Tabonuc forest at the lowlands, we have the Palo Colorado forest at middle elevations, and we have the elfin forest at the top of the mountain. And the elfinwood warbler, as the name of the species tell us, is a species that usually was considered associated with the elfin forest. So it was a species more associated with the high elevation areas. And I wanted to start with this project just to show you, because I think it was a really important project for me, and also because, yeah, it was a really important project for me, especially because it was when I couldn't engage the local environmental agencies uh, to the acoustic monitoring approach, and then really show them then how useful is that approach. And one of the ways that we could do that was just showing the results of these projects. So one of the results was, and that actually, it was kind of surprising for me at the moment, because when we deployed the recorders there, I was not expecting to see so many detections of the elfin wood warbler. But what we did, what we found was we were able to have a total of more than 800 detections in 3 months, 3 months of research. And when we compare that information, 800 detection, it may not be like too much, but when we compare that with an existing project, an existing long-term project in the same region, so it was a 17-year project, we can really see how the acoustic monitoring improved the detectability for these species. So in this 17 years project, we had approximately 144 detections. And again, like I said, in just 3 months, we were able to have 800 detections. So we are talking roughly about 3 detections per month against 7 detections per month. So that was, you know, like a good way to show like how acoustic monitoring can improve the way that we monitor rare species. And another very interesting result was when we took a look on the probability of occupancy of the species along the elevational gradient. So here we have elevation, lowland sides, high elevation sides, and here we have probability of occupancy. And we can see that these species, the elfin wood warbler, actually has higher occupancy at middle elevations. And that actually coincides with the Palo Colorado forest. So we used to joke a little bit about changing the name of the species for the Palo Colorado warbler instead of the elfin wood warbler. And as a result, we were also able to create this species distribution map to show where exactly we have a higher probability to find the species. And right now, people are using those maps to really focus on other studies on these species in those areas. Another question that we had was regarding climate change and species distribution, because several studies are showing that species are moving to high elevation areas because of climate change, and that is occurring in different parts of the world and for different taxonomic groups. So we wanted to check if that was happening also here in Puerto Rico. And what we did was we used our 3 elevational gradients in El Yunque National Forest, but also we compare our results with historical data, data from point count from 1998. And what we found was a mix of results. Some species, so here we have species and here we have elevations. So when you see like this green bar here, it means that species increased their distributions toward high elevations, or in that part toward like low elevations. Here, that species actually contracted that distribution. It means that the species used to occur at that elevation. Now the species only occur below that elevation. So again, what we saw was that there were some species with no change in the species distribution, some species that contract their distribution, but yes, there was several species that it seems to be moving toward the higher elevation areas in El Yunque National Forest. Another question that we have was, because we have data before and after the Hurricane Maria, we thought, well, let's take advantage of that data and let's see what was the impact of Hurricane Maria on bird distributions in Endemic National Forest. And it was, again, a very interesting project because the data that we had before Hurricane Maria was in 2015 and 2016. And during 2015, we had a very extreme drought here in Puerto Rico. And what we saw was that when we took a look on the population declines before and after Maria, we actually saw that there was many more species were declining after Hurricane Maria. And that was because we have that drought in 2015 and 2016. So that was a very interesting, well, a little sad result, but a very interesting result, showing that the drought can really have a greater negative impact on species distribution than the hurricane. And again, we really need to be paying more attention to that, given that those both drought and hurricane are expected to increase in intensity due to climate change in the future. Another question that we have, because we realize that yes, species are changing the distribution because of climate change, we were thinking, wait, you know, like species are moving the distribution because of climate change, so they are not waiting for policymakers, you know, to shift their distribution. They are changing. So how effective are the existing protected areas right now? Are species shifting outside the protected areas? So we were interested to understand if the distribution of suitable habitats for species of birds and frogs here in Puerto Rico really overlap with the distribution of existing protected areas in Puerto Rico. And again, that was a very interesting project. This is a project that is still in review. So we may have some change in the near future. But what we did was to compare the distribution of species in the past, present, and future. And what we did was to have more than like approximately 700 sampling sites all over Puerto Rico. And a total, we were able to acquire more than 900,000 1-minute recording. And the approach that we use is pretty much the same approach that I have been using through all those different projects. We collect the data, we analyze the data using the Rbmo Platform, we're using the pattern matching approach, for example. We always need to do some validations and check how the computer is performing, and then you use that information to understand species distribution. And what more specifically, what we did was, first of all, acquire the detection and non-detection information. And for that, we focused on rare, endemic, and endangered species. So we are talking about 13 bird and 8 frog species in Puerto Rico. We used downscale bioclimatic variables. So we have those bioclimatic variables from historical period, current, and future periods. And then we use species distribution models. And actually we combine different techniques, what we call ensemble models, to really have a better species distribution map for each one of those 13 bird and 8 frog species in Puerto Rico. So here, for example, you have one example for the Guabayro, the Puerto Rican nightjar. We have here the distribution map for the historical time, for the current time, and the future time. But actually, we try to focus not only on each time period, but we kind of overlapped those maps to try to focus on areas that were always suitable for those species. So although we can, we can see a little bit of change across the time, we thought about, let's focus on areas that are always suitable, because those will be most likely the areas that are really important for protecting the species. And then we create those maps for the 13 bird species and the 8 frog species. So here you can see like the always suitable areas for each one of the 13 bird species. And then what we did was to overlap those maps of all the 13 species. And actually we did that, like I said, also for frogs. So we combined the always suitable areas for birds and frogs, and then we overlap that information with the protected areas in Puerto Rico, the existing protected areas in Puerto Rico. And what we saw, first of all, is that we do have some protected areas that are overlapping with areas with in which we have several species with suitable areas. So we have a Junc National Forest and we have the Maricao protected area that really are important for conserving a lot of bird and frog species. But unfortunately, 80% of the always suitable areas are still outside the protected area. So that really calls our attention to what we need to do to solve the issue of climate change in Puerto Rico, for example. So we need to think what will be our next steps, what we need to do. Should we increase the size of the existing protected areas? Should we create new protected areas? Should we establish new corridors so that we can connect those protected areas? So that are some of the questions that we need to be asking right now. And just to give you some updates, right now we are actually conducting another study here in Puerto Rico, trying to update and expand that previous study, because most of those sites from the other study, this study here, were mainly in highland areas, in mountain areas. So right now we have like a collaboration with Recursos Naturales, Fish and Wildlife in Para la Naturaleza, to really expand the scope of this project. And right now we are focusing on sampling more sites in the lowlands, in the coastal areas. So we are talking about approximately 900 sampling sites all over Puerto Rico, including islands, the Culebra, Vieques, Desecheo, Mona. But also, as you can see, we have some points in the mountains as well. So we are expecting to have like an update map for those species, and really to create a baseline for species, a baseline for birds and frogs here in Puerto Rico, so that we can really understand the impact of climate change and human disturbances in birds and frogs. And more recently, we have been also working hard to improve the way that we can detect species in the Rbmo platform. So like I said at the beginning, we are dedicating a lot of time and effort in creating this convolutional neural network. So we don't need to enter in details how that convolutional neural network works. It's an artificial intelligence model. So it means that you provide a lot of training data, and then the system kind of learns how to identify the species. So you provide a lot of information, say, oh, hey, this is the Puerto Rican tanager, and those recordings here, those other species are not the Puerto Rican tanager. So the system will learn and will make predictions based on the training data that you provide to the system. But one of the important things, like one of the things that I love most regarding the convolutional neural network is, first of all, the ability to identify multiple species at just one click, because with the pattern matching, we really need to create models for each one of the species. And with the CNN, or convolutional neural network, we can identify multiple species at once. The predictions are made on raw recordings directly from the field. And we are able to achieve high accuracy and precision in the prediction on deciding if the species is present or absent. So here you can see a graph where we have species here, and we have the average precision. And you can see that we were able to achieve high precision on detecting species in Puerto Rico. There always will be some species that we do not have like enough training data, or there is some different features related with the species call that make it a little bit more difficult to create a model for that species. So we always will have some challenging species, but overall the results are great. And our idea right now in Rainforest Connection is to create these regional convolutional neural network models, so that we can have, a model for the Amazon, a model for Sumatra, for Indonesia, for Africa, for United States. So, and make those tools available to everyone. And I just want to finish my talk and I always try to do that, because I really believe in that. And I think that, we already have all the tools, we already have the knowledge to do that. But what I think is that we really need to think in collaborative ways to establish a real-time global species monitoring network, where we can have, like I showed to you, several acoustic permanent stations all around the world. So we have like thousands of permanent monitoring stations, pretty much like a virtual museum in the cloud. We have these regional CNNs, those regional AI models for real-time identification of birds, frogs, mammals. And then all those tools are available to everyone, so that we can really start to really understanding what is going on with the biodiversity inside those forests. As I said, I think that we already have the tools, we already have the knowledge. I think that right now is much more about, stepping out of our bubbles and start to collaborating and make that making that project work. So I think that I'm going to stop here. Thank you again for the invitation. Gracias. And I'm more than happy to answer any questions or comments that you may have.
Excellent. That was really, really interesting. Thank you, Marconi. All right, maybe you can stop screen sharing so that we can see you.
Sure.
Better. And great, yes. So what an exciting field that you're working in. And I'm really just so interested in the potential of this network for, as you say, increasing our capacity to monitor, especially things like endangered species or hard to find species, that are rare or elusive. This is so, so valuable. So I encourage everybody, if you have questions, to put them in the Q&A panel, and we will get to them one by one. Chris Johnson is asking, are the bioacoustic monitoring stations being used to detect nocturnal flight calls from migratory birds?
I know some initiatives, especially in the United States, they are focusing on that. I'm not sure. I don't have any details particularly about those initiatives because, for example, I'm not sure if we can really identify a species at the species level, but I know that there are successful initiatives doing that right now. Here in Puerto Rico, we are able to identify some of the migrants. So that especially the migrants that really nest in Puerto Rico. So they can they have like the territorial song, because it is still a little bit difficult for us to monitor the migrants when they are not calling or they are just like emitting the regular call, like just the cheap chirps, and so that's still is a little bit challenge. But yes, I know that there are people doing that right now.
Excellent. Good. Okay, we have another question. Is there a way for a private individual with a very small property, this is in Portland, Jamaica, to help with this effort? And with somebody that doesn't have technical expertise, like to put up their own recording station and report back, or, take care of the station, whatever.
Definitely. Like I was saying, the good news is that, like the devices are getting cheaper. So right now, like it's really affordable for many people to acquire like the audio mod or edge devices for $50. And the Rbmo platform is free. So you can, like go there, upload your recording, create your own models, and really establish your own project. It's almost like pretty much, it's like, again, we have all the tools. The platform is free. We have a lot of documentations about how to use the platform. And we are there. We also have like a channel to support everyone that are uploading the recordings. If you have like any question about that, we can help with that. So yeah, I really encourage everyone to start, like sampling your backyard, putting some devices in your backyard, and starting increasing the scope of acoustic monitoring all around the globe.
That's fantastic. So it's just another way for citizen scientists or community scientists to just get involved and do science as well and contribute to our knowledge, which is really, really cool, really exciting. So Hannah Madden in St. Eustatius says, thanks for the excellent talk. I was wondering if the envisioned database would be a bit like MoveBank, where detections could be related to spatial points and then to different variables related to those points, like elevation, temperature, etc.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's the idea. Right now in Rbmo, when you upload a recording, you need to provide GPS coordinates for that device. You really need to provide some metadata. So the base metadata that we are asking right now in Rbmo is GPS location and also the altitude. Of course, we can also extract the altitude in another moment. But the idea in the future is also to allow the users to add additional information about forest type or other environmental variables that are associated with the location of your site. But yes, we cannot, like, it's very important to have like your metadata associated with your device. So that's the only way to make your data useful for any posterior analysis is to have these kind of information. So right now we are trying to do that. We still need to, understand a little bit how can we improve and allow other kind of information to be associated with a web page. But at the same time, like I think that like we as scientists, as ornithologists, we should keep those informations as well, like saved when we really need to conduct the ecological analysis.
Exactly. Yeah. You need all those environmental covariates for your analysis.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm just thinking of how much time this could save. I mean, the hours and hours that people spend doing bird counts. And like you say, in 3 months, you had like so many more detections than many, many years of data. You know, the rate was higher, which is really cool.
Definitely. And one of the things that I just want to take advantage of this webinar right now is to sometimes, now especially in Brazil, like with my professors, I understand that, you know, like some people may say, oh, Marconi, but you know, like you are taking away one of our, like the best team that is to be in the field collecting data, you know? But I always say, you know, like that's not what is going on. You know, like what we are doing is really replicating your efforts. You know, like you, actually, we are freeing your time to be actually focused on behavior studies, or you know, like doing the other traditional techniques. For example, the mist net, for example. I'm not saying like sometimes I think that people may have like the wrong impression about, you know, like the acoustic monitoring will really obliterate all other techniques, and that's not actually the point here. You know, like it's just like another tool that really can improve the way that we are monitoring fauna. But there is still a lot of information that you can really, you only can have with a bird in your hand, for example, right? So for example, you can have 20, 50 devices in the field collecting information for you. And meanwhile, you will be like in another side, putting your mist net, collecting other kind of information, or conducting behavior ecology, or just bird watching and enjoying nature, you know, like, so it's much more about really another tool, another powerful tool to improve the way that we collect information, and expand the spatial and temporal scale of our studies.
Absolutely. Yeah, you make a good point. It doesn't replace having the bird in the hand and that data on body condition and so forth that you get.
Yeah, you will not have that information from the audio acoustics, you know, like the audio device.
So we won't all be out of a job with these devices.
And also, just to clarify, we still need help from the ecologists, the biologists, the ornithologists to providing the training data for the models, for creating the models, for validating the species, and also to have the question. You know, like we really need to understand that, you know, like one of the most important steps of any project is the question, the hypothesis that you have. And that's only a biologist, an ornithologist, an ecologist that will be able to provide that.
Exactly. Yeah, you got to have some objectives for your work. So we had a question, I think, from Facebook, Robert from Gainesville. Can cell phones provide suitable audio records for analysis?
Yes, they can. That's a kind of a trick question, because I know that there is a lot of variability on the cell phones, but again, if you are much more interested in really acquiring presence and absence data, detecting species, if the species is there or not, that's more than enough. Like at the beginning, we were using cell phones. Like we are modifying cell phones and putting the cell phones in the field to collecting information for us. So yes, we definitely can use that tool as well. But again, the benefit of the passive acoustic monitoring is that we can leave the devices there in the field, you know, like collecting information for us. And what we really want is to have like a bunch of the devices in the field, collect information 24 hours per day for several weeks and several months, several years. And I don't know if we can do that with the cell phone.
Right.
But yes, you can have information from cell phone, definitely.
Great. All right, another question. Could an app be developed to record data that is immediately available for analysis?
Could an app be developed to record data that is? I'm not sure that I understand the question, but I would say yes. I know that there are some initiatives right now from Cornell, for example, where you can identify species on the fly using your cell phone, for example. It's always a little bit tricky when we are dealing with soundscape analysis, right? When we have information, when you have like your shotgun mic, that's like a different story. Like it's much more easy to identify species. But when you have like a passive acoustic device that is recording pretty much the soundscape, is a little bit tricky to really be able to identify species there. But I say that yes, I would say yes, it is possible.
Excellent. All right, here's another question. Mark Hume from Trinidad says, great talk. Do you have a list of species for which you already have enough training data in your database in order to accurately automate identification?
Yes, we do. We have almost 30 bird species in Puerto Rico. We have almost 100 species from the Western Amazon, 100 species from Sumatra, 100 species for Ecuador. But we probably have much more. Yeah, right now we are in the stage of really figuring out how many information we have and really testing these convolutional neural networks. But again, if you are interested to use like the patch matching, you only need like one example for your species, and you will be able to have like a pretty good model for that species. Right. Like I said, like it depends on the model that you want to use. For the convolutional neural network, yes, we really need a lot of training data, and that's the list of species that I just said are the species that we have enough data for these AI models.
Great. All right. Darren Henry, he is asking, how long can this device be functional in the field? Okay, so right now we have different devices in the market. We have devices from the Rbmo, we have Bioacoustic. So it will depend what devices are you using. It will depend the battery that you are using. It will depend on the schedule that you are using, the sampling rate that you are using. So there is a lot of factors and variables to take into account to answer that question. I'm sorry, that's not like, I do not have like an easy question, but just to give an example, here in Puerto Rico, we can have like, if we have like a schedule, 1 minute every 10 minutes or 1 minute every 5 minutes with regular triple A batteries, double A batteries, you can have like 1 month of data. But again, it depends. Like sometimes you can, if you have like lithium batteries, you can have like the recorder there for like 2-3 months. But if you are recording bats, for example, that's another story because you need like large SD cards. So yeah, I will encourage you to go to check our webpage, to check the Rbmo webpage. You will find a lot of information about those devices and how long you can deploy there. But again, I think the first thing is to have your question, like to understand what you really want to do, because again, it is pretty easy to collect like a bunch of information. But the most important thing is, what are you going to do with that information? How are you going to extract information, and how you are going to make that information really available and have like a value for conservation, from a conservation perspective. Right. Yeah. All really, really good guidance and advice. Do you have, or does your website have something like a how to get started page, or is that something that you have written up? We do have, we don't have like the entire workflow, if you're asking about, you know, like going to the field, but we do have a lot of documentations for, actually we do have
a lot of documentation for setting up your devices, tips for schedule, what you should do in the field, and all the steps, uploading, recording, and analyzing the recording.
Okay.
As well.
Great. Is this on your Rainforest Connection? Is this on your Rainforest Connection website?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. And there you can also have access to our papers and studies as well, where you can find some examples of the sampling design, for example, that can be really helpful when you are conducting your research.
Great. All right. Let's see, another question. So did you have issues with any of your recorders being stolen or vandalized?
Yes. we had some problems. We had some problems with insects, with monkeys, but also people. Here in Puerto Rico, we have some recorders stole. Again, it's a little sad because, you know, like people, like those devices are not too expensive and people will not be able to resell them or using them for anything else. But people are curious and they think that it's like a cool gadget, you know, like, but usually it's less than 1% of our devices there are stolen or damaged somehow.
Okay, that's good news. That's really good news. And then what about the logistics of deploying like 700 or 900 recorders? Like, does that require an army of people to do it? How do you organize that?
It was a very interesting experience right now. Like we are almost finishing the deployment here in Puerto Rico. It took us 3 months for deploying the 900 devices, and we have 4 teams of 2 people in each one of the teams. So we are talking about 8 people during 3 months, and with 200 devices. So although we have 900 sampling sites, every time we have, like every week we have like 200 devices online in the field. So it does entail a little bit of planning and preparation, especially with the protected areas, the private properties. But again, here in Puerto Rico, at least, it's pretty easy to have access to most of the protected areas and most of the islands. I think when we are talking about Amazon or other places, that will be a little bit more challenging. But at the same time, just because, like, you know, like the devices are so small right now, like they can fit in my hand, so lightweighted. So it's pretty easy for just like, just to give you an example, I deployed the devices in Panama, in Barrio Colorado Island, BCI Island in Panama. I was by myself, and in just 2 weeks, I was able to deploy 100 devices in the island just by myself. Like, so I have like a backpack with like 50 devices in my backpack, and just, you know, like using the existing trails and put one here, another here, another here. So it's fairly easy, you know, like, but yes, you always need some trails or otherwise you can have access to those sites.
Excellent. All right, I think just one last question. I was curious about when you showed the precision of, was it detecting species? Why the Puerto Rican toady was so low, and what was the other one, like the cuckoo? Yeah, like,
right.
Like 50%.
Right. For the Puerto Rican toady, I think it's just because their call are just like a single note, you know, like just like a single.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of false positives. So it's much more difficult to create a good model for that species because there is like a bunch of other vocalizations or sounds that can be confounded. And also for all these species, we are still like unsure what are really triggering like that result. Sometimes it's just because you do have more overlap of all the species in the same frequency range, but also sometimes it's just because you don't have like enough training data. But for the Puerto Rican toddy, I'm pretty sure it's just because it's, you know, like it's just like when you see in the spectrogram, it's just like a sign, a thin line, and you know, like it can be confused with so many different sounds, and yeah, so.
Yeah, I was forgetting how different the Puerto Rican toady's call is like from the Cuban toady, which I'm more used to hearing, and that's much more distinctive and loud. And yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yes.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you so much for a really fascinating and inspiring talk. I think you've got a lot of people intrigued and interested in this technology. I know that some people are already using it or starting to use it, starting projects in the Caribbean. So we're really looking forward to, you know, hearing more about your research, you know, again in the future and at our next conference, and other people are getting into it as well. So it's a great tool.
Sure.
So thanks again, everybody, for joining us today. It was a pleasure to have you. And don't forget to sign up for next week, Thursday. We have David Sibley at 4 o'clock. Yeah, somebody's commenting, I'm totally inspired and cannot wait to dive into the idea more. Thank you so much. Everybody's saying very exciting webinar, great presentation. So really well done. And I thank everybody who's already on a team and planning to bird for Global Big Day. That is awesome. And we hope that if you haven't joined a team yet, that you will join one of those 13 teams and contribute, no matter what, go out birding and contribute your data to eBird and our Global Big Day effort. So signing off for now, and everybody have a great rest of the week and weekend. Take care.
Thanks again. Bye-bye. See you.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Take care. Ciao, ciao.